Hello, my name is Matthew, and I just read The Adventure of the Abbey Grange by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is a part of my read along series and book club with Steve Donahue. We are reading murder mysteries in the month of March, and we're reading all of the Sherlock Holmes short stories. And this one, the Adventure of the Abbey Grange, has an especially serious tone to it, a seriousness and also an immediacy in the story that's being told. And throughout all of these short stories that we've been reading, there has been, aside from the variety of crimes or cases and a variety of the structure in which the stories have been told, there's also been a variety of tone. So some can be especially lighthearted and cheerful. Some can be rather dark and horrific. Some are rather comedic or comical. And this one feels more serious and immediate. It begins with Watson being stirred awake, Sherlock shaking his shoulder while he's in bed asleep, uh, starting him, startling him awake, saying, we have to go. Time is of the essence. Which we know that Watson is writing these stories. So it was a style choice on Watson's part. Very often, he starts these stories by selecting the story and telling us. And so we already get a reserved, calculating feeling, also a comforting feeling that Watson's already at the writing desk. Everything has gone according to plan. No one's been injured or harmed. And so he's just sitting there thinking, which one of the many stories do I want to write? Not in this one. This one starts with Watson being shaken awake. We have to go. And the Inspector Stanley Hopkins, which at this point has become a recurring character. He's someone that works with and asks for assistance and guidance, advice from Sherlock Holmes. And we already get the impression, we've already had the impression that this story solidifies the determination that Sherlock has a fairly high regard for this inspector compared to Lestrade, who, as he pops up in these stories, does seem more and more bumbling. We had the story of the Napoleon statues where Lestrade comes stumbling into the house and says, well, there's a madman running around who can't stand the sight of Napoleon, and he's breaking these statues, which was utterly ridiculous. And Sherlock, uh, in the past stories, has even referred to Lestrade as an imbecile. This new inspector, Stanley Hopkins, nothing of the sort has happened, and even we've had Sherlock chastise Stanley Hopkins for not coming to him sooner. There was another case earlier on one of the short stories where several days had gone by, and by the time this Hopkins required or wanted the assistance of Sherlock, evidence had been destroyed. And so it also shows a sense of continuity with these characters having a slightly overarching storyline, very very thin, razor thin, but even still, we had a earlier short story where Holmes had remonstrated Hopkins for not calling him sooner, and now we have Sherlock up at the middle of the night with a note from Hopkins that a crime had just recently been committed, practically the same night, and he's stirring Watson awake. And while they're on their way, they've been at the station, train station. They're having their tea. They're on their way to the crime scene. Holmes is talking about what he knows and the fact that it came from Hopkins, and said he's never let us down. When he's asked for help or turned us on to a case, it's always been within good reason. And this case, this short story, apart from the mystery, and this story very much is an example of detection fiction. On top of that, it's very much apart the relationship between Sherlock Holmes, another budding detective, their relationship, and the respect and affection that Sherlock has towards Hopkins. When there's a conflict or a source of doubt, we see Holmes conflicted and doubtful. We arrive at the house that this murder has taken place. There's been a husband whacked in the head by a poker. What are those fireplace pokers? Whacked in the head so hard it bent the poker. And we have the distraught wife. And there's a household of servants and maids, the way there always are in these houses. And by the time that they get there, Hopkins, this budding inspector, is nearly apologizing and saying, actually, I was hasty. I spoke too soon. We've actually really wrapped up a lot of this case. It turns out it's this gang that's very well known. There's a name of the gang, and Holmes already knows about the gang. They've recently gotten out of prison, and they've recently committed a robbery in the area. It's a gang of a father and two sons. And the story that the wife told of this traumatic night lines up with the mode of operation of this gang. And we find out that the dead husband was an alcoholic, abusive and violent when he was drunk. The wife had become sorely disappointed in this arresting marriage that she's found herself in. We get that at the beginning, which seems kind of odd, but before we get to an unexpected surprise break-in with assault and murder. And we're told this story from the testimonial of the wife, who is described as beautiful and also haggard from the trauma that she's just recently gone through. She had been bound up, hit in the head, had been assaulted by these attackers, got knocked out unconscious from being hit in the head, woke up enough to see a brawl between her husband, who came in after he was hearing this conflict, passed out again from the stress and alarm. She was gagged and tied to a chair, and woke up after this. Her husband lay dead on the floor after being whacked in the head by this poker. Things had been stolen. The burglars had drank some wine to calm their nerves, and Sherlock, who respects the inspector, he came and gave a portion of this story. Things are already going well. We figured things out. This woman's testimony of the events that transpired over the night aligned with this. And there was just one detail Sherlock was uneasy about, and it was these wine glasses. There were 3 wine glasses. Doesn't really say very much about it. It's just there's something that bothers him. We know how Sherlock's mind works, but this Hopkins character says we've got the whole thing sorted out, and Sherlock kind of looks around and thinks a lot of this does add up. So there's really nothing here. Now, if it was Lestrade, the same exact scenario, Sherlock would have acted completely differently. Because he knows Lestrade is this bumbling, kind of buffoon detective character that he also doesn't respect as much as this Hopkins character. But he respects him, sees that he has good judgment, and Sherlock and Watson get back on the train, and Sherlock is brooding. They get to a train stop, and Sherlock just kind of pulls Watson off the train and says, I can't go. There's something bothering me. Everything kind of adds up. But if we act as if we didn't hear the whole thing from Hopkins, if we didn't immediately believe the story from this woman, if we look at it as if it's a clean slate, we don't know anything, how much of this is really adding up? These burglars who had just committed a crime recently, they had been in the news. Why are they immediately committing another crime? Burglaring another house? And when they did, how come they didn't take more than they did? Why did they commit a murder? If they're committing a murder, why didn't they kill the woman as well? And he just kind of starts mentioning all of these things that, as Watson points out, built up together, create a case that doesn't seem plausible. Each individual fact on its own can be explainable, but as a whole, it's not really making sense. And the key point that Holmes couldn't get over, these wine glasses, and it involved the dregs of the wine, and I didn't really understand the specifics of how all that operated and why it didn't make sense. I'm not a wine drinker, and I don't really know the terms, but it was explained in a way that even if you don't know, you understand it was a clue. And they return back to the house. They sit down with the wife again, who had gone through this whole story, and Sherlock says, I'm not here to cause you trouble. You know who I am. You know I know a whole lot more than what you're telling me. Why don't we start over and you tell me the truth? Which is such a great gambit, and also it adds the air of seriousness. We believe Sherlock's character. This has been some sort of tragic night. He has a reputation. He doesn't have to go through theatrics and run around town shooting off his telegrams just by reputation. And she retells a story. Back in Baker Street, we have someone by telegram who arrives, sits down with Sherlock, and again, it wasn't the robbers. It was a whole other story, like I mentioned before, where the short story that you might get at the beginning is dumped in at the end to explain all the mysterious things that we got through the portion of solving the case. This sailor, nautical type person sits down, had a relationship with this woman. She ends up marrying a violent drunkard. He finds her. He finds out where she's living, and this man's being abusive, and he hits her. He comes in and intervenes. There's an altercation, a struggle, which ends with this man killing the husband in self-defense, and then a rather clever cover-up story. They saw in the paper of this burglary gang. So they pretend to burgle the house. They dispose of it right outside in a hole in the frozen pond because they're not actually stealing anything. They're pouring the wine glasses. And this is one of those stories where Holmes keeps it to himself. He doesn't go to Hopkins, a person that he respects. Holmes knows the gang that he's after is actually in New York City. It wasn't even them. So he has no lines of a viable criminal. There's no one for him to arrest. He believes this person's story and that he's innocent. The woman was unhappy because she got stuck in this marriage where she's the wife of a violent, drunken man. She wanted out of the marriage. She already had this other person that she would rather be with. All of these things. And Holmes just says, give it some time. In the court of the Baker Street apartment, Holmes is the judge. Watson is the jury. He says to Watson, "What's your verdict?" And he goes, "He's innocent." So the person that committed the murder has a story that by the end of it has an emotional attachment, and it's not silly or funny or goofy or anything like that. It just seems like real people that have gone through struggles and trauma and terrible things, have done awful things, but they're not bad people. And Holmes just lets him go. But Holmes knows, and he solved the case. So that's the Adventure of Abbey Grange. Let me know if you've read it. Let me know what you think about it. So thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like, and take care.